Welcome to You Don't Know Ball. Today, we are in our last division for team previews, the NFC West. As always, if you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, let us know in the comments who you think will win the NFC West. We're going to get into our narratives right now. Let's start off with the Arizona Cardinals. Our narrative for the Arizona Cardinals is, are the Cardinals a wild card team? Are they a wild card team, Dobbs? Do you think they can be?
I think, and let's just be honest, right? There's really no yes or no. I think it's one of the toughest questions you could ask an NFL fan right now. But what makes it interesting is that there's valid merit to either way you could answer it, right? Like, I could sit here and say, abso-fucking-lutely not. The Cardinals did not make enough moves. The Cardinals still are too young, and they're not experienced enough in the trenches to be able to make a jump this year. Or I could play on the contrary, and I could say, but this is Gannon's second year. We already saw the culture change in terms of how the Cardinals play with Gannon coming in.
Fire in the gut.
They added guys. Wait, I'm sorry, what was that?
They have fire in the gut.
They literally have fire in their gut. Like, that's some shit. Like, what other coach is bringing fire to the gut of their players, right? So, like, that's an intangibles. We talk about intangibles. That's an intangible you just can't teach fire in the gut.
That's his Madden badge. They need to give coaches Madden badges.
They don't.
Like the X Factor, X Factor, fire in the gut.
Right. Write this shit down immediately, right? Andy Reid gets the 4-for-4 package. Like, no, we're cooking.
I'm a DM Ocho Cinco. Let him know right now.
Yeah, no, we're cooking with this one. All right, but back to the Cardinals. And look, here's the thing: playing the positive side of things. I could say to you, look, Trey McBride is turning into one of the best tight ends in the entire league. He could solidify himself as one of the casuals. Brace yourself. He could push himself in the top three, one of the best players in the NFL territory this year, if he can replicate what he did the second half of last year, right? Because, again, Trey McBride's one of those names where I feel like a lot of people still are, they got to get, learn the name quickly, because Trey McBride's coming on here. And you know what? If Jonah Williams can make a big jump and can finally shake that injury bug, you added a productive O-line member. And, Paris Johnson, if he can make a big jump this year, all of a sudden the tackle situation actually looks relatively good. And the final caveat that I haven't even mentioned yet, right? The most important thing is that Kyler Murray has shown that he can truly put the team on his back, on the squat rack, and just somehow, some way with his small frame, just carry this team. And we've seen it for first half of seasons before the Cliff Kingsbury offense just gets way too predictable and teams are all over it, which is basically what's already right back to the Cliff Kingsbury era. It's already what's happened. But we've seen that Kyler has talent. He has ability that cannot really be replicated by anyone else. Even in terms of, guys like Lamar. Kyler has a different he just has a different archetype of scrambling. It's just hard to explain unless you're watching it. But if you watch him, you know what I'm saying. And the bottom line is, Kyler being back on this team, they don't have all the bells and whistles, and they're not the loudest team. But you know what? To be a wild card team, I do think that they could have the pieces if Kyler Murray can just replicate that same success that we saw back in the first half of those seasons in the Cliff Kingsbury era. It's 100% possible, because I have a lot more faith in Gannon than I did in Kingsbury.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is I am interested to see how much Kyler is willing to use his legs. I don't know how much he's going to scramble coming off that injury. I do think that is what makes him kind of a dangerous quarterback. Now, I do think Kyler Murray is a pretty good quarterback. I think he's one of the more overhated QBs in the NFL, let's say. I think a lot of people don't like Kyler for whatever reason, and he's actually pretty good. I would want him as my franchise quarterback. Maybe not over some people, but he's not a bad guy to have. And I think with kind of what they did with Jonah Williams, I think if he can come in, I think they have a pretty stacked. I don't want to say stacked, actually. Let's move this back. I do like their wide receiver room quite a bit, actually. I think Michael Wilson as the 2 after what he did last year. Greg Dortch. I mean, I feel like they might miss Rondale Moore a little bit, but we saw today, unfortunately, that he has a season-ending injury. We don't know if that would have happened if he was in Arizona.
Right.
But with Trey McBride basically being your wide receiver too, and then you can bring in Trey Benson to run with James Conner. Like, I really like the future of this team. And after hiring Monty Ossenfort, the future of the Cardinals changed so drastically. Like, the Cardinals to me have always been one of those teams where it's like no matter what they do, it's like I don't trust their organization. This team has done such a 360 so fast. They added such a blue chip talent in Marvin Harrison Jr. The line is better. Like, they still have a lot to do on defense. Like, a lot to do. I do like Sean Murphy Bunting, who they signed, Max Melton, Buda Baker. Like, they have decent players in the secondary, but that defensive line is tough. But, hopefully Gannon can elevate them. And I think if the Cardinals get on a good run this year, there is a chance that they could be a wild card team. Okay. Let's say they take one versus Seattle. I mean, the NFC is getting stronger than what it used to be. It's not a pushover like, it used to be. But they got Carolina, they got New England, they got Seattle twice, they got Minnesota, they have the Chargers, they have Washington. Like, if they can win, I mean, they beat Dallas last year, and we know Dallas is kind of like flip-floppy, like wishy-washy. But I mean, I don't think it's crazy to say that the Cardinals could possibly make a push for the 7th seed if they get hot.
No, it's definitely not. And what I wanted to say real quick, while we're like on the defense for a second, is they're also the D line is very interesting. We're kind of like the Broncos, we were talking about earlier in the last video. It's kind of like they have a very interesting strategy schematically going on where they kind of also basically have like the two who should be interior backers playing that edge role in Zaven Collins and then Dennis Gardeck. But I'll say, look, Dennis Gardeck's been playing in that position for a while. He is built like an interior linebacker. I mean, he's 6', 230. Look, and to his credit, he's the definition of hot or cold. Like some games, Dennis Gardeck's on fire, and you're like, oh my god, he's actually like a really good edge. And some games, it's like, all right, he's getting killed today, and he's just not playing good, right? He's the definition of hot and cold. But kind of like to the Broncos, they make it work, and it's. Well, I can't even say that yet, actually, because we haven't seen Zaven Collins besides practice. But word is, right out of camp and everything, it's going relatively good, and the experiment it's going to translate into regular season. So we're going to see an edge duo of Zaven Collins and Dennis Gardeck, which is going to be very, very interesting. But to your point about that interior of the D-line, it's probably where a majority of the cap's going to go into next year's draft, kind of like what the Jaguars did this year, if we're kind of talking about trying to crystal ball what a team's plan will be for the 2024-2025 season. But right, as far as this year goes, yeah, are the Cardinals going to win the Super Bowl? No. But can Marvin Harrison have a historic rookie season? Can Kyler get back to old form? And can we see that these offseason signings paid it forward, that it's going to have an impact on this team down the road? Absolutely. And if all three of those things can happen, I think we can soundly agree that the Cardinals have put themselves on the right trajectory in the NFC.
I think they'll be one of the faster rebuilds in the NFL if their draft picks hit this year and they have a good draft next year. Ready to move on to the Rams?
Oh, you know it.
Can Matthew Stafford take the Rams to the Super Bowl, Dobbs?
Again, it's kind of like we say about the Rams every year at this point, ever since that they proved to us that you just can't doubt McVay and Stafford. That's all there is to it, Hunter. You can't doubt McVay and Stafford. We played this game before, and they showed us how it goes. You know me. I always like to say in terms of likeliness. No, I don't really think there's a very big chance that the Rams we see even back in the NFC Championship game this year. But it is possible, right? Especially when we talk about the fact that the O-line, Rob Havenstein made a pretty big jump last year. Now he's had a very sound, good career his whole career, but pretty big jump last year. Kevin Dotson had a humongous jump, became one of the top 3 guards in the whole league. Steve Avila moved over from guard to center, where he played all right last year as a rookie guard, but I think At center, we could see a big jump there. And then we're going to have Jonah Jackson, who also is like the O-line version of Dennis Gardeck in terms of being hot and cold. One game he's on fire, one game it's really bad. But, right, if you get a good Jonah Jackson, you're getting really good Jonah Jackson. And then left tackle situation still, it's probably the most shaky with Ulrich Jackson. It'll be interesting to see. But it's also, you're not getting you're getting a middle tier starter. So the O-line is still in place. The receiving core, you still got Coop, you got Puka, Demarcus Robinson, Super Bowl champion. The running back room looks really good. The defense has a lot of just really good, young, ascending guys on it. But the defense is where it scares me, Hunter, because I feel like as far as making a Super Bowl push, there are so many guys that are so young that would have to be playing lights out. It's not the offense at all that scares me. It's the defense when it comes to being a championship football team again.
I mean, I understand that and I get it, but with the additions of Cam Curl, they draft Cameron Kitchen, they take in Tre'Davious White, they add Jared Verse, they add Braden Fisk. Like, they can never replace Aaron Donald. No player will ever replace him. But with the additions that they made on defense, I think the Rams I think everyone knows what the Rams can do, but I don't think enough people are really considering them as Super Bowl contenders. And when you have a defense that's kind of built like they're built, and McVay and Stafford on the other side of the ball with a healthy Cup and, fingers crossed, healthy Puka Nacua, and you have Kyren Williams and Blake Corum, I don't know how you look at this team and say, oh yeah, they can't win a Super Bowl. Like, this is exactly the type of team ready to win a Super Bowl. And I think Jared Verse is one of the more polished players to come out of the draft, where I think that the transition to the NFL, yeah, there's going to be one, but I don't think it's going to be this steep uphill climb that a lot of these guys face. I think he's going to be able to come into this defense and contribute right away.
No, and you know what? To that point, Hunter, the reality is this too. Look, you have Bobby Brown, 6'4", 324, just clogging the middle. And outside of on his shoulders, we got four very productive young defenders, right? Byron Young, Kobe Turner. We saw Kobe Turner's already turning into one of the best defenders in the NFL in his first year. He could turn into a premier all-pro type of player this year. And then on the other shoulder, we got Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, FSU buddies, who, right, the way that they will play off of each other, the finesse combining with the power, it's going to be a scary unit down there, Hunter. And look, the weakest link on this defense as of right now is Christian Roseboom. But look, he showed you in 2022 he can play good ball, right? Like, last year was a really bad year from him, and it just wasn't a good year all in all tape-wise. But he could bounce back, and if he bounces back, there's really not one spot on this defense you could sit there and say is a bad spot. It's just that they don't have, like, the DB room is the definition of, like, it's mid, not in the sense of like, oh, they're bad, but just like they're middle line, like they're a midline DB group. But when you combine a midline DB group with one of the best D line groups, it doesn't always matter. So if this D line can be what we think that it can be, all of a sudden that DB depth doesn't matter as much. To your point, we would be fools to count them out of being Super Bowl contenders. They already showed us once.
Now, separate from that, do you believe that the Rams could possibly win the NFC West, or do you think this is the 49ers division?
I think that's the most fun question, because this is where the Niners fans start freaking out in the comments. No, I'm just kidding. It's funny because, for whatever reason, if you say that the Niners aren't locks to win it this year, everybody looks at you like you're crazy. You're a villain. But objectively, Ricky Pearsall is already dealing with a bunch of injuries. Christian McCaffrey's already dealing with an injury.
Hold on. Let's save this for the 49ers talk.
Okay, you're right. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
look, the reality is, we would be crazy to say that the Rams don't stand a chance to take that division. Rams fans,
they stand a pretty
is it Rams
chance.
House season again? Is it Rams House season again?
Welcome to the Ramily. Welcome to the Ramily.
Could it be? It could be, Hunter. You never know.
All right, let's go to the 49ers. Can they finally get over the hump? My answer is, if they trade Brandon Ayuk, I don't know. I don't know because, like you said, now Ricky Pearsall, pup, he was on the pup, I believe. I think he's off now. But Christian McCaffrey dealing with an injury, and Brandon Ayuk is probably going to be a Steeler. And here's my thing: this video is going to come out in like a week or so, so the trade may have already happened. It's, from what I understand, pretty close to happening.
Wait, let's make sure you preface that.
Yeah. Like at least that's what Pretty Ricky's saying. But anyway, to be clear,
legend.
I think something that people are, and I don't know if 49ers fans have thought about this. They probably have. But Debo is getting older, right? Very physical player. George Kittle's getting older. Trent Williams getting older. You have to pay Trent Williams. You'd have to play Brandon Ayuk. You'd have to pay Brock Purdy after this year. And I guess my thing is, we have never seen Purdy without like an all-star cast around him. So what happens when more gets put on Purdy if Brandon Ayuk is not there and he has to make up for the lack of talent there? Can he deliver? And that's something I don't know about. I think Purdy is a very good player when he's in the right system, like most quarterbacks are, and when he has talent around him. But can he elevate players who are not of Brandon Ayuk and Debo's and Christian McCaffrey's talent? That's hard to say because everyone on the field who's running a route is really, really, really good. And that's something I think 49ers fans have to think about. I don't like the idea of trading Brandon Ayuk because it's like you could have got a first-round pick probably for him earlier this year and you didn't do it, but now you're going to do it. Like, I don't understand thinking that unless, like, Ayuk is truly like a locker room cancer. I don't understand why you move him at this point unless you're thinking, well, he's going to leave anyway. We're not going to pay him, so we might as well get something for him. But if that's the case, you should have did it earlier. I don't know.
See, I'm going to just... Niners fans are going to hate us by the end of this, but Niners fans
already dislike me because I'm a 49ers fan.
I only want the best for every team. I only speak objectively. So stick with me here, Niners fans. It's going to hurt at first, but you're going to get what I'm saying. Yeah, I promise. Because, we go back a year or two ago, Hunter, when the Debo trade rumors were swirling.
Yeah.
And when they were real high. And you remember back when Debo essentially was in the Ayuk position. It's kind of weird how history repeats itself. So we remember a couple years ago when Debo was the name. He was for sure. Debo's out the door and for sure. And you remember the Niners fans. That can't happen. Like, he's such an important part of our offense and we need Debo, and like losing Debo would be terrible. Okay. Well, ended up figuring it out to make it work with Debo, right? But I think, and Niners fans agree with this, what I'm leading up to, is if you had to pick one now to keep on the roster, I think if you're not crazy, respectfully, I'm sorry, or at least if you're an all-22 watcher, there's no way that you're not taking Ayuk over Debo.
I think over
as
age,
much as, yes, Debo bring up, I'm sorry, what was that, Hunter?
With age, too.
With age, with skill set. Look, I know Debo's fun and he has a very unique skill set, but what Ayuk's doing right now, and I've been preaching on this for a while. A lot of people don't understand because it's kind of like how you could say about some people, perhaps in the Michigan offense, right? We'll make the Niners the NFL version of their offense doesn't allow for that same statistical output that some other receivers are going to be putting up, but it does not mean that the receivers in these offenses are not just as talented. Like, from a route running perspective, from a hands perspective, I can't stress this enough, from a nuance, like understanding what to do, where to be on the field, when to sit, when to carry. Like, Ayuk has mastered that part of the game. The most intangible part of the game that most receivers never master, Ayuk has mastered. Like, if you put Ayuk in a pass-heavy offense, I can really see him going for 1,600, 1,700 yards if he can stay healthy for all 17 games. So the bottom line I'm trying to make is that losing Ayuk is not just, you look at the stats and you're like, we're losing a plus 1,200 yard guy, and yeah, it hurts, but it's like, no, Ayuk is one of the guys. He is a top 3 talent of receiver in the NFL. And it's just because he plays in an offense that doesn't allow him to like get very stat heavy per se, but you are losing one of the very best, and I cannot stress enough, young, rising, ascending talents. And that's what makes it so tough. To your point of like, yes, they still can go all the way, but when you're losing essentially your best player besides Trent Williams and Nick Bosa, it's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, there's just no other way you can really address it. It's a really tough pill to swallow.
Well, I would also say like another reason that it's could be tough, and I want to make it clear, like I said I'm a 49ers hater. I just try to look at the downside of how the 49ers are operating, because I think they pretty much get like, oh, the 49ers are a super team, blah blah blah, but like there's a reason they haven't gotten it done. Like there's a reason that they have not been able to get it done. Like until you win a Super Bowl, like I don't really care. I don't care what you do in the postseason. I don't care what you do in the regular season. Like unless you win the bowl, it doesn't matter. And I think my thing is when you trade Ayuk, you're not gonna get really what you should, because it's this late into the year. Not late into the year, but basically you're not going to usually make a trade during training camp. Like this should have been done if you know what I'm saying? And also
There's already so many hours that would have been valuable to have them in the building, like to your
right,
point.
right. And it's like wow, I just blanked. That's crazy. But it's also just like I remember. They're not going to get everything they thought. Like you're not going to get a first. In my opinion, I don't think, and like I said, I may look really stupid because this is going to come out in a week, but I don't believe you're going to get, in terms of draft capital, everything that you could have gotten if this was done before the draft, So,
No,
it's
100%.
tough.
As far as that's concerned, like, look, and even to your point, they still might squeak out a first round pick, but I think you could have squeaked out more than that. Like I'm saying, look, Brandon Ayuk is truly, he is in the realm of like, there's elite players and then there's game changing players, the tier above elite. Like Brandon Ayuk last year put him like soundly in the game changer, game breaking tier. And he showed it in every level. He showed it. He showed it in the Super Bowl. Like this is a guy who, like the term people like to use for the Ayuk's type of receiver. You can't guard Brandon Ayuk in a fucking phone booth. Like Ayuk is truly turned in to one of the best. So the bottom line is that they ended up, clenching on to Debo when they could have done that with Ayuk. It's got to hurt a bit as a Niners fan. And I mean, look, you can sit here and cope about it. You can reminisce on how Debo's a harder runner and Debo is more fun to watch sometimes. But the reality is that Brandon Ayuk is the better receiver nowadays. And not that it's not somewhat close, because Debo is still a really productive and really talented player, but he's not Brandon Ayuk. And that's just all there is to it.
And all this to say that the San Francisco 49ers are still a Super Bowl favorite. I think that's that's what we need to take away from this, is like they're still a Super Bowl favorite.
Minus everything else. Exactly. Like to the positives, look, you still have Fred Warner, you still have Nick Bosa.
But Jair I will Brown say, are you worried about Dre Greenlaw not being the same type of player he was after the Achilles tear? I mean, that was 6 months ago. Like,
well, there's a lot, but I say if you're a Niners fan though, all in all, right, like you do have more positives than negatives. Like, okay, you're gonna get Hufanga back. Hopefully Hufanga is gonna be that same, right, really, really good player.
So, and then I heard this stat on the Athletic Football Podcast today. Their rushers, like their pass rushers, they lost 3 through 7 of the people on their team last year that had the most pressures. So 3 through 7 on the depth chart, or 3 through 7 in terms of how much pressure was generated by them last year, gone. They don't have them anymore. So I'm really interested to see what this Niners defense looks like this year.
That is interesting. I actually did not see that, so I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, like it is gonna be damn interesting, because it is definitely a newer look. I mean, when we're adding Malik Collins and Leonard Floyd to the line, it's no matter what, right? We still expect the same from Nick Bosa, but I think you could also say, and not that, I mean, I'm not trying to sound like negative. Javon Hargrave had a good year last year, but it was not the same year he had in 2022. No. So if Javon Hargrave declines even just a little bit again, all of a sudden Nick Bosa is the only guy really producing on the D line. it starts to become noticeable. But again, it's all hypothetical. The bottom line, this Niners team still should be
Yeah,
showing up at the NFC
stacked.
Championship game, at least.
All right, let's move into our last team in the NFC West. We have the Seattle Seahawks. And our narrative is we don't know what the narrative is because we sat here for probably about 5-6 minutes going back and forth, and we just can't decide what this year is supposed to be for the Seattle Seahawks. Like, okay, you have a new coaching staff, right? You have a kind of a new GM. I mean, not really because Pete Carroll was making the final decisions pretty much on a lot of personnel decisions, but he's been there before. Like, I don't know. Like, the GM's been there, so you have a new offensive coordinator, you have a new head coach. Are you gonna really invest in Geno? Tyler Lockett's getting older. They have young pieces on defense. I just feel like there's so much in flux for the Seahawks that it's like this season kind of needs to play out a little bit before we're able to really see like what this year is supposed to be for the Seahawks. They let both their safeties go. Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, they're both with the Titans now. You have Kenneth Walker, who, is really good, but I don't know if he was used to his highest potential last year. And, you could see JSN take that next step this year. You have Byron Murphy. It's just, they're so all over the place. I don't even know, like, what to expect in terms of, the Seahawks should be a decent team. They have pieces, but in terms of what they're trying to accomplish this year, I really don't know.
No, and like, I guess I want to start. Seahawks fans, do you guys feel special? You guys are the one team we couldn't come up with a narrative with. That's pretty impressive. All right. Jokes aside, look, here's the let's like I got a lot to say, so I'm gonna try to wrap into a small thing. The first thing that really confused me about this offseason here from the Seahawks is, and again, look, from the perspective of GMs sometimes don't want to spend draft picks. There are some organizations that just don't like taking flyers, right? And the Seahawks must have said to themselves, I don't want to spend a fifth, sixth, or a seventh on a flyer in talking in my, let me specify, a quarterback flyer, right? Like a guy like, okay, he definitely has some upside and we could get him in the building and let's try it out. Kind of like they did with Russ. Now, even though Russ was more of a mid-round flyer, and I'm referring to more of a late-round flyer, I am relatively surprised that the Seahawks didn't say, you know what, let's get a Joe Milton in the building, right? Let's get a Spencer Rattler in the building. Let's just kind of feel out how a young guy, a real fresh blood is going to look coming straight from college here. Give him some time to develop. I am really surprised they didn't go that route because I get it, right? If you're a Seahawks fan, you're saying, well, we got Sam Howell. Well, we saw with Sam Howell. He's like we were saying, I said about a few other players earlier, definition of hot and cold, right? Like when he's hot, he's real hot. But when he's cold, he's like, yo, he can't be playing in this game. He's going to ruin the game cold. So if he doesn't get out of that this year, he's probably going to lock himself into being kind of a perennial backup kind of quarterback. And not there's anything wrong with that. If that ends up being Sam Howell's ceiling, so be it, right? But to the point of the Seahawks' future, if Geno keeps getting older, Sam Howell's not the guy. Devon Witherspoon is going to be going in then next year into his third year on a contract where we see how that DB market is rising. Boye Mafe, you're going to be due to pay in a year after that. I mean, just all over the board, I guess you're going to be having to pay a lot of young guys, right? Like, Tyler, like to your point, Tyler Lockett's getting older. What are you going to do with Tyler Lockett? The O line is very contingent on Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas kind of getting back to like that rookie year form. Because if they can't this year, Hunter, this O line minus Connor Williams, but the problem with Connor Williams too is it's like Connor Williams, is he the same
Bad
Connor Williams
injury. Yeah.
before the injury? So, and if it's not the same Connor Williams, the Seahawks could truly be like one of the very few teams that has like nothing figured out on the O line. And again, Seahawks fans, I don't want that to be the case. I was a big Charles Cross truther. Really loved the way he played his rookie year. Surprised that it was a regression last year. We can't have another year of that. We certainly can't have another year of that with Abraham Lucas, especially with how talented that this young receiving core is. JSN, DK Metcalf, you got to give him time to get open. You got to give him time to develop. That's why Seahawks fans, I hope we laid it out as much as possible why it's so complicated to evaluate your guys' team because you guys are just a tough evaluation. You're the definition of, they could sneak their way into the playoffs and have a really successful year and surprise a lot of people, hit them with some uppercuts, or they could get knocked out in the first round. I mean, they're so like they're such an anomaly of a team.
I do want to go kind of back at what you said, regardless about or regarding like taking a quarterback later in the rounds. I think that's what it was with Sam Howell. I think that's why they traded like a third for him. I think that was, you know, that was their flyer. Like I feel like they saw something in Sam Howell that I mean that they think he can maybe be the future. With that being said, though, talking about the O line, it feels like very like pieced together. Lake and Tomlinson, Connor Williams, right? So it's gonna be interesting to see. I think where I don't want to say issue, but my confusion comes for the Seahawks is I'm a very big believer in if you don't believe this is the team that's going to take you to the Super Bowl and you're kind of a new regime, you might as well just kind of tear it down a little bit, Like you move what you can, but Seattle has been one of those teams kind of like the Steelers that they just and the Saints recently where they're just like, let's be good enough to stay relevant, right? And I do think Pete Carroll that year with Geno really thought that they can compete, and they did. They did really compete, but that didn't last. And I almost feel like maybe this year with the Seattle Seahawks is kind of similar to what we were talking about with the Denver Broncos, where it's kind of like, let's see what we have, right? And then we can make our decisions because the team is too good to like stink like really badly, And it's like maybe they're going to try out some new players and new spots and kind of see what's going to work the best and kind of go from there. I just think it's one of those like influx seasons for the Seahawks where it's like, let's see what we have. Let's address in the offseason and kind of go from there because it's like, okay, realistically, like Geno is 33. How long do you expect him to be your quarterback of the future? And that's not, I hate saying that because I really like to see Geno succeed, especially after all he's been through in his career. But with that being said, like we also have to be realistic and, since 2013, he's only had 3,000 yard seasons, right? And I mean, last year or 2 years ago was 4,200. Last year was 3,600. So it has been of recent that two of his three seasons came, but I don't know. Like, okay, let's say you get 2 years down the line, right? He's not gonna, and I don't know. Like, I just think the Seahawks are too far away to be Super Bowl contenders where Geno can take you to that promised land. But I do think maybe in those years, if Sam Howell's not the guy, they're trying to develop a guy to kind of take his spot. And I think, their window to win a Super Bowl is really kind of just really, I feel like really at the start. Like this is where it's like you're figuring out what you have and going forward, you can just kind of like move what you need to move and kind of rebuild from there. I think it's a big assessing year for Mike McDonald.
No, absolutely. And like, and you're spot on. Like, I think if anything, that's kind of the point. Like Seahawks fans, you might think we're railing on you and making it sound like it's bad. It's all bad. No, actually, it's exactly what Hunter said. Very more than likely, it is the start of opening the Super Bowl window. And sometimes when you're cracking that window open, maybe sometimes you got to get the crowbar. It's a little ugly. But you know what I mean? That's kind of the situation you guys are in now. You're jamming that crowbar. You're figuring it out. And you guys are going to crack that Super Bowl window sometime soon. It's just the dust is settling. You guys are figuring out who you're going to hold on to and who you're going to ship out. I think that's kind of the perfect way to assess the situation right now, Hunter.
100%. Any last thoughts before we wrap up the team preview series?
Final thoughts, just the West divisions. Just a lot going on. Just a lot going on in the West Division.
A lot of
that's
flux,
for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, if you don't know ball and want to know ball, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, let us know in the comments who you think will win the NFC West, the Los Angeles Rams. That's the narrative I'm going to ride this year. But let us know in the comments if you agree, disagree. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been a really fun series. We'll do it next year. Maybe switch it up a little bit on how we do it. But we are so excited to get the season underway. We'll have more and more content as, we get closer to the season. And we'll have, weekly videos, daily videos once the season starts. And I'm so excited. It is so fun. And today is the opening of preseason week 1. And that's what I'm going to go watch after I end this recording. So awesome. Have a great rest of your night. Thank you.